Welcome to Mid-One Pager. My name is Benjamin. Today I'm going to talk about cleft lip and cleft palate, and this is another important surgical condition, especially in the pediatric population. So when you look at the cleft lip, a cleft lip is going to happen when we have failure of fusion between the median nasal prominence and the maxillary prominence. So when you look at this image, we have different parts that make up the face during the development of the embryo. We have the lateral nasal process, we have the frontal nasal process in between here. Then we have the stomatium, which develops into the mouth, the eye, we have the Graber's process. Then we have these maxillary processes, and then we have the mandibular arch. Of course, the mandibular arch is going to give you the mandible. The maxillary process is going to form the maxilla as well as the upper lip. So the upper lip is supposed to come and fuse with the frontal nasal, it's going to come and fuse with this nasal prominence, this median nasal prominence, use frontal nasal process. So if there's failure of fusion around here, that is when we are going to have the cleft lip. And the cleft lip can be unilateral, for it can be bilateral, and 75% of the cases are unilateral. And it can be complete, it can be complete cleft lip if it goes until the nose, and it can be incomplete if it's just the lip. And we're going to look at that classification. So what happens is that in the anatomy, the philtrum, the cupid's bow, and the orbicularis oris muscles are going to be disrupted. This orbicularis oris muscle is going to contract and is going to pull away the one part of the lip from the other. So if it is complete, it's going to extend into the nostril floor. So it extends into the nose. Then if it is incomplete, it is going to stop short, or it's not going to reach the floor of the nostrils. So epidemiology, it occurs 1 in 700 births and mostly in males. And the risk factors include maternal smoking or alcohol, anticonvulsant therapy, that is phenytoin or valproate, deficiency of folate, diabetes. Then some syndromes have also been involved, and most of the time these cleft lip and cleft palate are going to occur in syndromic babies. So we have the Van der Waals syndrome, we have the Kabuki syndrome, then we have the Church syndrome. So the classification, as we looked at it, we have the unilateral, that is L or left or right, then the bilateral, and then we have the median. Then we have the complete versus the incomplete. So this is an image showing. So this is a complete cleft lip because we have it extending into the floor of the nostrils. This is bilateral complete, and this is a unilateral cleft lip. And sometimes you have the cleft lip occurring alone, or it can occur with a cleft palate. So the clinical features are going to involve a cosmetic deformity and the feeding difficulty. With children with a cleft lip normally better breastfeeders compared to those with a cleft palate. This is because if you're breastfeeding and the breast is made to fit into the defect or the side where we have that cleft lip, it can improve on the cell and the child is able to suckle. Then we have a nasal deformity if we have extension to the nose. And then speech is going to be normal when it comes to these children with cleft lip, unless they have also the cleft palate. So as we said, we have associated conditions and 30% are syndromic. And because of this, you have to always check for other defects that they could have, like a congenital head defects. You have to check for limb defects. You have to check for renal anomalies. You have to check for Van der Waals syndrome and Van der Waals pits. When the complications, you have scar deviation, or when the scar is formed, you can have asymmetry, or can have the whistle deformity, nasal stenosis, and then we can have alveolar defects. And when we have alveolar defects, that means the bone which holds the teeth is affected. So we may need to do a bone graft, and bone grafts are going to be done around 8-10 years. And the management, you have to ensure feeding is cooked. And for feeding, sometimes you use the lactation specialized bottles, as well as lactation support. And sometimes we may have to have the mother express and put the milk on a spoon to feed the child and things like that. And even when they are feeding, it's important that you hope they feed in an upright position so that it's easier for them that way. So the timing we have the rule of tens, and this is very important when it comes to the management of this condition, whereby we're going to repair the defect at 10 weeks. At the child should be 10 pounds, and that is about 5 kilograms or 6 kilograms. Then the HB should be above 10. But nowadays in modern practice, they just do it at 3 months, and so then you find that 3 months I don't repair the defect. So the surgeries that we can do, we have the miliary rotation advancement, and this one is the most commonly done. There's the tennis on rounded triangles, there's the bilateral, and if it's bilateral, you want to wear a pre-surgical NAM, then loop adhesion, and then you do the definitive repair. Then during the surgical operation, this is the time you want to inject 1 to 2 million adrenaline injection, and this is going to help you with the hemostasis at that point. Then you want to do nasal correction if there is that asymmetry or disruption, and you want to do primary rhinoplasty, that is tissue sparing. Then postoperative wound care is important. You have to put elbow stress on the child does not have the wound, and then you want to ensure that the child is not sucking, so because this will again disrupt to the sutures. Then long term, you want to do revision surgeries if possible, and sometimes they may require psychosocial support due to the deformity or the scar. So when we look at cleft palate now, cleft palate is going to occur due to failure of fusion of the palatal shells, and it is going to involve the hard with the soft palate, or it can be isolated, or it can occur with a cleft lip. And the epidemiology and risk factors, we're going to have a syndromic, and syndromic cleft palate is the most common. So most cleft palates are associated with syndromes, and one of the most important syndromes is the Pierre-Robinson sequence. This is going to be the most common disorder associated, and what happens in the Pierre-Robinson sequence is that the child has a micrognathia, that is a small jaw or a small jaw. And this is what starts now the sequence of things that involve. Now, because the child has a small jaw, the tongue is going to push backwards. And when the tongue gets pushed backwards during embryology, the palatal shells come, fuse, develop downwards, and fuse. So as the palatal shells are developing, they're supposed to develop in the size of a child. That this tongue is up there. It cannot go down because the jaw is small. So it's going to create a mechanical obstruction, and then there won't be fusion of the palate and the half the cleft palate. Then we have the Dye-George syndrome, that is the 20q11 deletion, and that one is going to be involve cardiac and immune issues. We have the Treacher-Collins syndrome, the Stickler syndrome, as well as trisomy 13. Trisomy 13 is the most involved aneuploidy. Then the environmental factors, you have maternal diabetes, and this is going to triple the risk for cleft palate. We have the retinoic acid exposure, and this is a drug that is used for treatment of acne. And we have gestational hyperthermia, that is if your mother goes to gyms like saunas or they have maternal fevers. So you have the classification, you have the VO classification, and the VO classification, you have type 1, where it's only affecting the soft palate, type 2, where it's affecting the soft and hard palate, type 3, when it is a unilateral cleft palate plus a cleft lip, that's unilateral. And type 4 is when we have a bilateral cleft palate and cleft lip, that is the VO classification. Then we can also have we have sometimes what we call a submucous cleft palate, and this one has its own classic triad, and many submucous cleft palate cases are going to only present with speech issues and no visible abnormalities. So examine the palate, there is no that cleft, but it is because it's submucous, it's inside there. So when we look at this imaging, we are seeing that here you're having a cleft palate only, and it's on the soft palate. This one's a cleft palate with a cleft lip, and this is bilateral. Then we have a unilateral one, which is a cleft palate with a cleft lip. So we have this LAS classification, or the LAS notation. So this one basically is L is standing for lip, A is standing for alveolus, H is standing for hard palate, and S is standing for soft palate. So when they're in capital letters, they show that they are complete. It's a complete lip cleft. It's a complete alveolar origin that this is an alveolar that is affected. H is a hard palate is affected, and S, the hard palate is affected. So when they are in capital letters, you know it's a complete type. When there is small letters, it's incomplete type. And when there is asterisks, then you know they are microclefts, or small clefts. And then when they are repeated twice, when they say LAHSHAL, it means we have a bilateral clefts. And this one may be important for you to know, depending. So we have the clinical features that happen in cleft palate. Most of the time, feeding is going to be affected, and these children are going to have nasal regurgitation because of that opening in the cleft. So the mouth communicates with the nasal cavity. They have inadequate negative pressure for suction, so breastfeeding is an issue, and they have prolonged feeding times. Most of the time, when a child feeds for more than 45 minutes now, they end up buying the calories that they were taking in. So optimal feeding should last about 15 minutes. So you find that in these kids, it's going to take longer and longer. And even when they go about 35 minutes, they even start breaking down the calories. They don't have failure to weigh, and they don't have power weight gain. Then you have in the ears, remember the ear communicates with the nasopharynx through the eustachian tube to balance out the pressure. So what happens is that we have middle ear effusions. This is almost universal. And we have conductive hearing loss and eustachian tube dysfunction. So we have this muscle called the tensor veli palatini, and it's important in the opening and closing of the eustachian tube in the oropharynx. Now, because we have a cleft, its sensation is going to be abnormal. Normally, it's oblique, but it gets to be horizontal. So when it's horizontal, it cannot open the eustachian tube very well. So we always have a negative pressure within the ears, and it's going to pull things inside, and these are going to cause the effusions, going to cause the conductive deafness. Then when it comes to speech, we have hypernasality again, because we communicate from the nasal cavity. So we have hypernasality and nasal air escape, and then we have glottal stops and reduced intraoral pressure sounds. And these people are unable to pronounce consonant sounds like P, T, K, P, and T. Then when it comes to the airway, especially if you have Claire-Robinson sequence, you have to be careful with this glossoptosis, where the tongue is pushed backwards because it could obstruct the airway, and there may be a possible need for airway support. So the surgical management for the cleft palate is normally done at 9 to 12 months. And this is because if you do it earlier than that, you're going to have retardation of the growth of the maxilla. And this is because it is believed that as you do the surgery, there is damage to the growth center of the maxilla. So we may have a small maxilla, and this is going to affect a bit of things, even the cosmetic and the dental, or the child will develop dental issues. In the surgery, we have the Badach to flap phalotoplasty. You have the fallow, and the fallow is mostly done. In the phallotago-opposingoplasty is the one that is mostly done, especially if I want to improve speech, and it's good because the orientation of that levator palatini muscle, named the von Lagenbach, is also an old method of preparing the cleft palate. Then airway may be important. You may need to do a tongue lip adhesion or mandibular distraction. Then when it comes to the hearing, you may need alichromates and tympanostomy tubes, because remember there are issues with that eustachian tube. Then since these people develop a lot of effusion, so you need to put a tympanostomy to kind of try and drain that. Then speech therapy is mandatory, because these people have venopalatine insufficiency. Because of the venopalatine is, the muscles are not really, the venopalatine muscles are affected, as well as the abnormality in the palate is there. So they have venopalatine insufficiency. So the complications early enough, which have bleeding, air obstruction, and pain and difficulty breastfeeding. Then intermediate, you may have an oral nasal fistula forming. You may have speech delay and persistent middle ear effusions, and late you may have velopharyngeal insufficiency. It's going to affect their speech. Maxillary growth disturbance, where they have a small maxilla, and chronic otitis media even after surgeries will persist. Then hearing loss as well as psychosocial issues. Then feeding is an important thing when it comes to cleft palate because when these children are in the neonatal period, feeding is going to be a very big issue. So we have specialized bottles like the Haberman feeder, we have a pigeon feeder, and the Dr. Brown's cleft feeding system. The positioning should be around 60 to 80 degrees so gravity helps them with the feeding since they cannot suck. Then we have to make frequent pauses and avoid too fast flow meters. Then we have the palate obturators, and these ones are like custom made devices that are fitted into the mouth to close the defect in the palate. And so they are not going to be a definitive management, but the child is going to cook, the mother is going to cook them, especially if you have like defects, severe feeding defect, and we want to assist feeding preoperatively so that we achieve this weight in the feed in the child. Then limitations, it requires update. So you need to actually, as the child grows bigger and bigger, you make a new mold and make a new palate obturator, and they do not replace surgery. So it's so important to notice that the causes of cleft lip and palate are multifactorial, and these are going to be genetic as well as environmental. If it's the lip, it's due to failure of the median, nasal and the maxillary processes. If it's the palate, it's going to be failure of palatal shelf fusion, and that discovers in the secondary palate. The primary bite is always okay, the one that has the gum. Then the red flags is that in parabin sequence, they are going to have airway compromise because of glossoptosis. There's persistent hypernasality, and that is velopharyngeal insufficiency. Weight gain is there in infants because of poor sucking. Bilateral cleft lip. There is severe meso or alveolar deformities. And the core management timelines is that lip repair is being done at 3 months. Bilateral repair will be done at 9 to 12 months. And if there is need for alveolar bone graft, it will be done at 8 to 12 months, 12 years when the root of the canine is touched form. Then orthodontics are going to be done throughout childhood. I hope you learned a lot in this video about the cleft lip. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, leave a comment, and share it with a friend. My name is Benjamin. This is my grandpage. To meet us then.